Family members of patients are not permitted inside Elmhurst Hospital in the Queens neighborhood of New York City because the hospital is now overwhelmed with coronavirus patients and is shifting to dedicating its 545 beds entirely to coronavirus patients. The New York Times is reporting tonight that Dr. Ashley Bray describes the situation at Elmhurst Hospital as apocalyptic. The Times reports that on Tuesday, Dr. Ashley Bray performed chest compressions at Elmhurst Hospital Center on a woman in her 80s, a man in his 60s, and a 38-year-old who reminded the doctor of her fiancé. All had tested positive for the coronavirus and had gone into cardiac arrest. All eventually died. When Dr. Bray tried to get in touch with the family of the 38-year-old who died, she discovered that the man's mother was a coronavirus patient at another hospital. We weren't able to get in touch with anybody, Dr. Bray said. Such are the ways of life and death in New York City tonight. More than 2,800 coronavirus patients have been hospitalized in the city of New York. The hospitals are expecting that number to go way up from there. Donald Trump keeps talking about a hospital ship that he is sending to New York with 1,000 beds, but it is not going to arrive until after Easter, when Donald Trump wants everyone to go back to work. The New York Times is reporting tonight all of the more than 1,800 intensive care units in the city are expected to be full by Friday, according to a Federal Emergency Management Agency briefing obtained by the New York Times. Patients could stay for weeks, limiting space for newly sickened people. Joining us now is one of the New York Times reporters on this story. Michael Rothfeld is a New York Times investigative reporter. Michael, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. One of the points you make in this article is that the people who are showing up at the hospital now are much sicker than the people who were showing up earlier because people are being told to wait and stay at home and self-quarantine and see if their symptoms develop. And so now they're waiting longer before they show up at the hospital. What does that mean to the way they can be treated?
Well, it just means that, the truth is that if they are going to get very sick and they're going to have problems breathing and need oxygen, there's actually not much that the doctors can do for them except try to hold off the flu until their body's immune system kicks in. But what it essentially means is that people are coming in, they are already sick, and some of them are getting much sicker much more quickly, like within hours or, a day of going into the hospital. And so they start needing more and more ventilators, more oxygen, and it becomes a very dire situation with a lot of very sick people, more than the hospital can handle.
Michael, I read a lot more of your reporting at the beginning of this hour, including your report about the line that forms at 6 a.m. of people trying to get into the hospital just to be tested. And we read the quotes from the man who was in that line for a few days and didn't get in there, still doesn't know. When you were reporting on this, there's four of you who worked on this article. Some of you had to go to that line and talk to those people who might be infected. How protected were you as reporters when you were doing that?
Well, my colleague Somini Sengupta went out there a couple days today and yesterday and spoke to these people who were in the line for the tent. She, I think, was careful to keep a distance from those people. And I don't believe she had a mask on, but very obviously concerned about her safety. And, it should be noted that the tent is not part of the hospital. And it's actually where people who they may not be the sickest people, but they do want to be tested. And the hospital offers them the option of getting tested, as opposed to if you're going into the emergency room right now, they're just reserving that for the sickest people. And they're not going to turn you away, but they're not going to test you in the emergency room. So this testing tent, because they've had such tremendous volume at Elmhurst Hospital, the tent relieves the pressure on the inside of the hospital where they have so many people going in who are really sick. So it's kind of like a safety valve for them.